from white gangs dominating the North and West Side during the most dangerous era in Chicago. A gang leader being awarded $25 million from a lawsuit, then using it to pay hitmen, and 2 Chicago cops being charged for doing a drive-by in civilian clothing, all the way to the drill era, led by possibly the greatest lyricist to ever come out of any side of the city. This is the story of Chicago's Northside. As the suburbs were built up around Chicago, a new middle class emerged from the economic boom that came after the Second World War. The middle class whites in Chicago increasingly moved out of the city to the suburbs, although many of them still worked in the city. The neighborhoods they left were suddenly wide open for the less fortunate black, white, and Puerto Rican kids on the Northwest Side. And by 1979, when crime in Chicago hit its peak, statistics so brutal that even the kids today running around with switches letting off 30 shots per second is nothing compared to the organized and planned hits of this time period, from the Popes to the almighty Gaylord Nation. These are the lesser known white gangs of Chicago. Now, I make that distinction because unlike many gangs in the US, in Chicago, these gangs not only engaged in turf wars, but race war historically as well, which is just a reflection of the time period they grew up in. Born into an era where segregation was still legal in some states, it's important to remember that most of these guys were just kids, following the trends and beliefs of the time. During this era, the gangs were so organized in the city, they even had business cards, although I'm not exactly sure who they might have been handing these out to. But going by history, let's start with the Popes, a gang once associated with the Simon City Royals. And if you never heard of the Royals, it's one of the more mixed gangs of mostly Hispanic and white members, whose former leader, Thaddeus Jimenez, was a man who, after winning a $25 million lawsuit from the city after being wrongfully convicted as a teenager, got out of jail and became one of the most dangerous people on the streets in the early to mid 2010s, because being sent to prison as a kid, there's very little rehabilitation to be gained, especially in the United States. Most people sent to prison at a young age in the US, rather than mature, tend to become institutionalized and stuck mentally as the teenager they went in as. And as a 16-year-old in the hood of 90s Chicago, being a rich and powerful gang leader is somewhat of a dream. When Thaddeus was released from prison, a wealthy man from his lawsuit in his 30s, the organization of gangs that he knew had long since left the city. But he brought it back using the only thing that could: money. He did this by converting local gang members such as vice lords and four corner hustlers to his side to rebuild the Simon City Royals. He put bounties on the head of any men that stood in his opposition, allegedly, but this didn't last too long, as not being accustomed to the technology available, while driving a new Mercedes he bought, he actually ended up recording himself shooting a guy in the leg and got sentenced to 9 years. But back in the day, before Thaddeus, they were aligned with the gang called the Popes, which was a group started by the Greeks in Chicago that originally claimed the blocks of Lawrence and Rockwell. Now, I definitely cannot tell you what the name Pope stands for, as it's very graphic and very racist, but they were primarily in conflict with the Latin kings, which had a much larger presence in the city as they still do today. Now, I will say that the Popes mostly dropped the race war aspect when they started allowing black and Latino members into their nation, although they weren't necessarily part of the folks or the people's nation, which historically was a pretty important distinction in Chicago. These guys were insane, and I mean that both literally and insane as in they were renegade, meaning they would pretty much get into it with anybody regardless of structure. And they were also split between the North and the South Side Popes, and kinda at war with the entire city. And this actually led to their leader, Larry Morris, also known as Larkin, being assassinated by a member of the almighty Gaylords, which would become the most powerful gang on the North Side by the 1980s. Now, interestingly, people will claim that Larry's killer is alleged to have been a former member of his own gang, proving that the back door has been open since the beginning of time. After all, it was Judas that sold out Jesus to the Romans. You see, Chicago is so big that many people in the city wouldn't even know about these guys, since it's not uncommon for Chicago residents to still have neighborhoods in the city they have yet to visit. And speaking of the modern era, we have to cover some of the story of the guy that showed the rest of the city what they should have already known. And by that, I mean that the North Side, for the most part, is not somewhere to play. Like most of Chicago, there's very nice areas and very nice looking areas that can be very misleading. As any Northsider will tell you, it's nice up there and there's some money, but it's still Chicago, and like I said at the beginning, there were 2 Chicago cops that did a drive-by seemingly unprovoked in the Pilsen neighborhood, so it's important to always remember where you are. Now, I still remember my first time hanging up north in high school. It was 2014 and Young Pappy was rapping, but his music hadn't spread around the city yet, so I was still very much unaware of him. But the following year, when I heard of Young Pappy for the first time and learned his story, there was no mistaking that we had all misjudged the Northside. And when we started hearing his ops go back and forth with him, we knew for sure that we should be careful going up there because there was a whole area full of street politics that we knew nothing about. People might remember his music, but his era and generation made the full leap from hands to guns. A guy in his mid-30s from the Northside was the last generation to see street brawls, because by 2013, many parts of the Northside went from home invasions and robberies to straight up murder. The world didn't get to see Pappy shine for any longer than a year due to his death, but they had tried to kill him at least twice before he died, with both times leading to the death of the person standing next to him. And as regards to Young Pappy's death, unlike most murders in Chicago, the answer as to who did it is very, very unclear. From rumors that the police killed him to rumors that it was guys he hung around, his death might still be the biggest mystery in all of Chicago drill. One thing that is clear is that he was shot twice in the back, and it was likely by someone on foot instead of people shooting out of a car. And I think this is what helped contribute to the backdoor theory, since it's implied that he was walking with someone who lagged behind only to shoot him in the back, and it happened somewhere around here. Now, this of course is just speculation, but his closest friends don't even seem too sure about what happened, so it's definitely the most popular rumor. But from his death, Chicago drill moved into an era I refer to as the F your homie he dead era. As disrespectful as it sounds, we just have to call it like it is. Once Pappy died, there was no other artist on the north side that could recapture the hype he built up. A couple of his friends had a good shot at it, but pretty much most of them went to jail or died. 3 of them ended up in prison, 2 on murder charges. 1 had a good buzz, but he kept going in and out of prison until he lost it. His rivals had a good shot, but in the end, they were more famous for being in opposition to him than they were for being rappers. But once Driller, a guy from the 51st area on the south side, dropped what might be the most disrespectful song in history, this revitalized the worst part of the drill scene, the disrespect. And the north side briefly came back into the spotlight, but today there are just as many drill rappers up there as in any part of the city, and with drill, only 2 to 5 people at a time have any real buzz. In the end, drill didn't really change the north side of Chicago. The city changed itself, and drill is just a reflection. If it was as easy to record music and get exposure back when the Gaylords and the Popes were holding power, we would have saw them doing the same thing. Now, today, of course, if you go to the crazy old head part of Facebook, you can still see some of the retired Gaylords or still active Gaylords doing their thing, although you won't see them much. But this is part of why Chicago is actually 5 different cities. The north side, the 2 very distinct west sides, the south side, and the east side. Now, obviously the story of gangs in Chicago, like anywhere else, starts with one common denominator, which is poverty. But once certain things, like gang culture, begin to age, and there are no leaders left to explain why they existed in the first place, the young guys aged 12 to 16 decide a new meaning for it, especially when the older guys left on the street would rather just sell you a gun and some weed than drop knowledge. Where the culture is revenge. Nobody knows the paperwork, rules, or regulations, as it's all pretty meaningless today. But if every young man in America knew how to let things go, we'd have no war in the streets. Like all of the city, the north side is beautiful, and it will continue to be so. I do recommend that you visit the city if you have never been. Don't let my videos scare you. But thanks for watching.